Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched I Care a Lot. Let's talk about it. So I Care a Lot is directed by Jay Blakeson and stars Rosamund Pike. She plays the character of Marla, who is this truly evil, truly despicable human being who takes advantage of the most vulnerable people in society, the elderly. She runs a scheme, she runs a scam that illegally assumes legal guardianship of these elderly people using a doctor's note and a doctor's testimony to ensure that the judge would grant her this legal status as a guardian to the elderly. And as a result of being granted that status, she is able to get every single asset that these people have. She's able to take control of every single element of their lives, to the point where, of course, once she achieves this, she's able to just sell off their houses, sell off their assets, and make a huge profit from them. Not to mention, on top of all of this, she actually pays herself for her services, for caring for these elderly people, and as a result, her business is booming. Okay, this scam has been working very well in the area that she's been operating, and she just continues to do so. She has this entire wall of poor victims that she's using in order to profit off of. It is truly despicable. I mean, Rosamund Pike plays this character so well. To already dive into some of the best aspects of this film, her performance has to be the driving force. It has to be the driving force of that conversation, because she is the best part of it. Her portrayal of this character is the best part of this film. But where things start to get a bit rocky, okay, is with everything else, and in particular with the second half, which we'll get into in the second half of this review. But before we dive into my thoughts, as per usual, before I forget, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. Without further ado, let's continue to dive into this. So as I was saying, I think Rosamund Pike's performance was absolutely phenomenal here. She really drove the story forward. Her portrayal of this almost sociopathic character who has no empathy for some of the most vulnerable people in our society was truly, it was infuriating, but it was effective in how infuriating it was. I really do think that in the hands of an inferior actress, this role just wouldn't have been carried out in the best way, which matters so much because there are so many issues with this film overall that it would really make a difference if we did have an inferior actress at the helm here, at the forefront of this story. And as I alluded to just now, I do think that one half of this film is far superior than the other, and thankfully in some ways it is the first half that is superior because it is very compelling. I mean, just hearing that premise, you're already intrigued, your interest is already piqued, because you're thinking like, oh my goodness, imagine having this film that explores the issue of elder abuse. These people are so vulnerable. We see their experiences in the care system, we see their experiences in the health system. I mean, it's just so heartbreaking to see what these people go through after having been contributing towards society their entire lives, but when they get older, it's almost as if society is like, we're done with you. Don't really know what to do with them anymore, so we're just gonna shove them into these institutions and fill them up with pills. I think this film does such a good job of establishing the landscape that we're working with here and establishing the true issues, the true problems that these people face, especially when you have sharks like Marla coming for them, even when they don't even need this care. I mean, she targets people who don't need to be in care homes just so she could take their assets, just so she could sell their houses and gain a profit from that. It is literally sickening what she does, and it's literally sickening and scary to see how easily she's able to accomplish this because the law is basically backing her the entire time. But we'll get into that more later on. I do have a few thoughts on that one, but I will say, like I said, the first half does such a good job of setting up this landscape that I was really compelled. I was really intrigued to see where this story would go. And another thing that the film does such a good job of is setting up the character of Jennifer, who's portrayed by Diane Weist, I believe is how it's pronounced. But this is such an interesting character because she is an elderly woman, and initially the doctor that Marla is in cahoots with sells this woman as a sort of cherry. She labels her as a cherry, which is basically someone who has all of these assets, someone who's very much done well for themselves throughout their lives, so they're sitting on a pile of money, but they don't have any living relatives, they don't have anyone who would be a proxy to take care of them. And Marla's eyes just light up when she hears this, and when she gets that file, she thinks, oh, this is perfect. This will be my next victim. Oh my God, I'm going to get so rich off of her. And of course, in exchange for that, the doctor asks her for some stocks in some care homes. So it's all a huge, ugly, disgusting, pile of mess of a business that the doctor is in on. But unfortunately for all of them, unfortunately for all of the parties involved, they picked the wrong woman this time around. They picked the wrong one. Absolutely not. Because it turns out that Jennifer has some interesting connections with the Russian mafia. Okay, just straight up the Russian mafia. Now I have to say, at this point I was like, okay, I can see where this is going. I can understand if the film is trying to, give Marla this huge slice of humble pie and show her that what she's been doing has been wrong all along, but she's really messed with the wrong person this time around. Like, I can see where that character arc will be going for this film. So I was still on board, even though I was a bit struck. I was struck, I was surprised by the inclusion of the Russian mafia. I was like, okay, this is an interesting twist, but we're still going with it. Because I have to say, going into this film and seeing this setup and this premise, I did think that it was at least semi-biographical. I thought it would be somewhat based on a true story. So when we got into the Russian mafia situation, I didn't quite know what to think. I do think that a huge part of my issues with the film were based in my expectations going in, and the idea that I thought it would be much more serious and much more sincere, a commentary on how elderly people are treated in society and how these sharks, take advantage of them. But the Russian mafia thing definitely threw me off. Still, at this point, I was still very much on board, because I actually thought that they were trying to establish this very interesting parallel between Jennifer and Marla. I thought that the film was trying to present Marla for the very first time with a formidable adversary in Jennifer. I thought that's the direction that they were going in, where Jennifer would be the first person who was just too sharp, who was too persistent, who was too, well read up on her rights, someone who had an established career beforehand in the finance sector, I believe. I thought that was why they were establishing the character of Jennifer in this way, because you can see how independent she is. You can see how sharp she still is, and she's living a very peaceful life on her own. And so to see that be disturbed is heartbreaking, and so you're automatically on her side. That whole sequence where all of her rights are being stripped away from her, and then all of her assets are being stripped away from her when she's dumped in that care home, was so well done. And so I thought it was establishing an adversary in Jennifer, as opposed to what actually happens, where it turns out that the true adversary that Marla has to deal with is her son, who's actually a Russian mobster. Now that was kind of disappointing to me, and I guess we'll dive into the parts of the film that I didn't really like as much, but that is the first thing that kind of put me off it. This is where things got a little bit hooky. This is where things got a little bit Scooby-Doo. The exact moment that I could identify things getting completely off the rails, for me personally at least, was when Peter Dinklage's character was trying to rescue his mother from their care home, and he sent his goons to go after her, and then this confrontation ensued in the hallway of the care home when they were trying to come for her, and there was this poor unassuming elderly man who's just walking by with his cylinder, his gas cylinder, and his drip feeder, everything that he needed, and he was just walking by, and then one of the goons kind of collided into him or something, and the gas cylinder literally just goes flying goes flying all over the place like a cartoon, a balloon that's been popped. It was just so crazy at that point. That was the exact moment where I was like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. This is not the serious tone that I thought this film would have, and it's unfortunate. And I personally don't think that this battle, this gang war between Marla and Peter Dinklage's character, who I can't remember the name of, should have been the direction that the film took, because I personally think that a battle of wits, a battle of intelligence between Marla and Jennifer would have been the better route to go down. First of all, because when it came to the gang war, there was no side that we actually were rooting for. Like, we weren't rooting for Marla because she's a despicable person. She sucks. And we couldn't root for Peter Dinklage's character either, because he's also a despicable person who sucks. So the only person that we actually wanted to see come out of this well and unharmed was, Peter Dinklage's character's mother, who was Jennifer. Like, that's literally all we cared about. We just wanted her to be able to go home, to be able to take control of her life once more, and she would kind of act as a representation for all of the other elderly people who were taken advantage of, except this time it wouldn't be reliant on the fact that she has a son who happens to be in the Russian mob, and instead it would just be based on her exercising her rights and being knowledgeable about that sort of thing. Maybe she would have been an ex-lawyer, mafia or something like that, it would have been a completely different tone for the film, and I think it would have made for much more of a compelling story, one that was rooted in a little bit more reality, and one that very much aligned with the kind of story that we were heading towards based on the first half. Another issue that I had with the involvement of the Russian mafia is that the story no longer became about the elderly people who were being exploited for Marla's sake. The story was no longer about Jennifer, who was stuck in that psychiatric hospital for no apparent reason because she didn't need that psychiatric help. It became so focused on Marla and her goals and her ambitions to become a millionaire that it completely forgot about the vulnerable people that had been victims of Marla's scam, and therefore, you know, characters like Jennifer were completely left behind. And secondly, the issue with bringing in the Russian mafia is that all of a sudden Marla goes from being this, you know, completely despicable, awful human being, but still a businesswoman who's very savvy, who knows her market, she knows the area that she works in very, very well, she has these deep connections, to someone who's basically like Jessica Jones. she basically turns into Jessica Jones in the second half of the film, and that's because she has to, because she's dealing with the Russian mob. So all of a sudden her whole profile has to change. She's no longer just an ordinary woman who happens to be very good at her horrible job. She now needs to become basically an assassin. Like, she now needs to become something that we want kind of set up for her to become at the beginning of the film. And again, that's the issue with involving an entity like the Russian mafia and these mobs who have goons who should just be able to shoot on sight when really they're incompetent. And that's another thing as well, that at the same time, whilst this film tries to elevate Marla as this, you know, all-powerful Jessica Jones female character, it also has to diminish the effectiveness and the competency of the Russian mob, because otherwise we're dealing with such a vast difference that it's just so unrealistic even for that world. So the Russian mob becomes very incompetent, okay, sloppy as hell. You have these goons who are unable to do the basic thing of assassinating this woman who literally poses a genuine threat to their boss's mother. Like, they're not even able to do that. They're useless. But what really just had my eyes rolling all the way to the back of my head was Fran. Fran should have died. Fran should have died. Why was she alive? Okay, so this girl has her home broken into by the Russian mob, right? She's packing her bags because she's like, Marla, we need to go. We can't be staying here. Even if there are diamonds involved, even if there's a ton of money involved, we need to leave because it's the Russian mob. She's packing up her bags, ready to go, except it's too late because they're already here. So I'm thinking, oh no. Oh no, because these scenes take place, you know, at the same time where you have Marla being kidnapped by the Russian mob. So I'm thinking, okay, well, one of these scenes is going to turn out to be more tragic than the other. I'm getting ready. I'm like, okay, so the stakes are high. They're going to establish that the stakes are high because they're going to kill Fran. So she gets beaten up off camera, but she gets beaten up. And I'm like, oh my God, this woman is getting beaten up in a Hollywood film. I've never seen that before. Okay, this is interesting. So I'm sitting there waiting for the sad news that Fran is dead. And it never comes. It never comes because Marla ends up clawing out of the worst situation possible, one that even Doctor Strange himself couldn't get himself out of. She ends up clawing out of near death and manages to get herself back to Fran, only to find Fran on the floor in a house that is completely saturated with gas at this point. They left the gas on the cooker, and so the whole place is just gassed up, ready to blow at any moment. So at this point you're thinking, oh God, not only is Fran dead, but she's gonna spontaneously combust too. Oh no, why is it so cruel? Why is it so grim? But no, she wakes up. Fran wakes up, and not only does she wake up, but when she gets up, she has like one bruise on her face, like the signature Hollywood bruise that's just on your cheek, that's actually supposed to kind of cut the cheek, kind of contour the cheek to make you look more attractive. Yeah, she has that. That's it. That's like, you couldn't even give me that. You couldn't even give me a meaningful death. I mean, you already set up the relationship between Marla and Fran, and the fact that Marla pretty much only cares about Fran. She doesn't even care about her own mother. So Fran is literally the only person she seems to have an emotional connection with. So it would make sense then, to me at least, that while she would be able to save herself from that hostage situation, Fran wouldn't be able to. So she's actually lost something, and ultimately that would kind of drive her forward and motivate her to take revenge on Peter Dinklage's character. Like, I thought that's what we were doing. I thought that it was a very clear path. Why didn't we do that? Why didn't we? Then we get to the part where I actually see the genius of Marla. We get to the part where she uses her skills, she uses her intellect that had been established at the first half of the film to take down Peter Dinklage's character. And quite frankly, it was a stroke of genius. Quite frankly, I was impressed seeing that forethought, seeing that thought process that she went through in order to entrap him the way that she was able to do so to his mother. I thought that was very, very clever. A very, very clever twist. But then it disappointed me again, guys. It disappointed me again because it kept going. Like, the film wouldn't stop. The film wouldn't end. There were so many false endings because in the next scene we see the two actually joining up and starting their own corporation, their own nationwide corporation for this scam. And apparently these corporations would be, you know, happily and easily run by a Russian mob and no one would look into it, whatever. And then you also have the issue of these judges, because not all of these judges are going to be as lenient as the one that we saw in wherever she was from. Like, that judge was ridiculous. That judge was a literal joke. Like, everyone is telling you that this woman is a problem, but you're just ignoring, like, you ignoring it on what basis? It was ridiculous. At least if they'd explained that he was in on it and he was actually profiting from the scam as well, then that would kind of make sense. They established him as an actual honorable judge, as someone who took his court very seriously, and that just made no sense to me, because if several people are telling you that there's an issue with this woman, maybe you want to look into that, especially when she's using the same doctor each time for these cases. Like, maybe you want to look into the relationship between this woman and her doctor. And aside from the fact that a small voice in the back of my mind was telling me, well, what use would Peter Dinklage's character have for Marla after they've set up their business? Like, why wouldn't he just kill her after she's done all of the hard work in setting that up? Like, aside from that, at the very least, I thought that this film would have a message about this woman persevering, this woman pushing forward, pushing ahead, regardless of the consequences, regardless of her lack of ethics. She was pushing through no matter what to achieve her goal of being wealthy, of never knowing what it's like to be poor ever again. At the very least, we can have that. But then at the very end, very end, we have yet another twist. And it was, you see this man show up out of nowhere. This is the same man who made an appearance at the beginning of the film and who had spat at her for doing what she did to a bunch of other elderly people to his mother or his grandmother. And in the meantime of the events that were happening throughout this film, his grandmother or mother died, and he wasn't able to see her during that time, and so he is very angry. And he's come with more than just a mouthful of spit this time around, because he has a gun and he shoots her dead straight up, and that's the end of the film. And I'm left thinking okay, so we couldn't even get the message about female empowerment. Instead, the moral situation does matter, because ultimately she ended up dying because of what she was doing. So it is kind of trying to establish that what she was doing was wrong. She deserved this punishment. So I guess that's the moral message of this story, of this film. I don't know. You see the confusion here? I don't understand. The first half had great potential. Great potential. How can you ruin a setup so badly? But then the second half just, it lost its way completely. The tone of the film changed completely into something that I think was inferior to what it could have been had it been more serious and sincere. And on top of that, you have the wacky hijinks between the mafia and, you know, Marla suddenly becoming a Jessica Jones type character that created even more of a tonal dissonance there. And then ultimately you have these several false endings until you reach that ultimate ending, which is the truest form of irony, because just moments before she ends up dying, she was having this TV interview where she was talking about how she was just getting started. So it was like, haha, you're not going anywhere. And so with all of that being said, I'm going to be giving I Care a Lot a 6.5 out of 10. And just as a side note that has absolutely nothing to do with the quality of this film, I did find it kind of funny because when I was going to watch this film on Friday, I went on Netflix because I believed it to be a Netflix film. I think that's where I saw the promo for the trailer, and I was searching on Netflix for ages. I was scrolling through all of these new releases until ultimately I decided to type it in on my TV TV because I was watching this on TV. So I had to do the whole, up and down on the keyboard on the TV. And then I actually ended up Googling it because I thought maybe I've got this release date wrong or something. But it turns out that internationally it is actually distributed by Amazon Studios. So I ended up watching it on Amazon Prime instead. So that was a little that was a little trip, I guess, completely inconsequential, but it was just funny because I was scrolling through Netflix for so long wondering if I'd gone crazy, when in reality it was just a distribution rights issue. So that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on I Care a Lot, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this film down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.